So in this video, I'm taking a look at the medium spec of the new Redmi G gaming laptop from Xiaomi. Now, this particular configuration I have has the Core i5, the 10300H, that has 4 cores, 8 threads, maximum turbo is 4.5 gigahertz. It's paired up with 16 gigabytes of dual channel DDR4 RAM, 512 gigabyte NVMe drive. It has wireless 6 in here, which is the Intel AX201, a 56 watt hour battery, full spec Type-C, display port, all that is on here, backlit keyboard, a very good build. It's got a fast screen on here too as well. It's 144 Hertz, the refresh rate of this one. It's a 16.1 inch panel, quite a good panel as you'll find out in this particular review. And of course, what is powering all of this gaming performance here is the NVIDIA GTX 1650 Ti. The more lower end model has the 1650, and I believe it's worth it to go for the 1650 Ti with this configuration. So in this in-depth review, I'm going to go in detail. We'll take a look at the thermals, the gaming performance as well, some benchmarks, and my overall opinion of using this, all the pros and cons. And this unit, no, it's not a review unit from Xiaomi. This is one that I picked up from banggood.com. So inside the box, we have this power supply here and cable, which is packaged up quite nicely, the laptop as well. So we've got a plug here that is like the Australian, New Zealand style one, which they also use in China. And this is the power supply here. Also well packaged up to prevent any damage to it. And this one here is rated to 180 watts. The plug is that Mickey Mouse style looking one, so very easy to source a replacement cable if you want one for your own region, of course. So the Redmi Book is just over 2.5 kilos, which is kind of standard for a gaming laptop with this spec. And if you include the power supply and the cable, that brings up the total travel weight then to 3.15 kilos. So on the right-hand side here, we have a Type-C port that supports video out 4K 60. We've got 2 USB 3.2 ports, a little bit too close together here. This is one of the 4 exit vents, and a bit of heat does come out. And I'll get onto thermals later on, even break out my thermal imaging camera to show you just how hot this particular gaming laptop gets. Now, just around here, you can see a little bit of a lip. This is, in fact, rubber around. So when the screen is down, it presses up against this rubber, which is great, which means it's not going to scratch or leave marks over time of transporting this particular relatively heavy 2.5 kilo laptop around in, say, a bag. Now, the thickness of it right here is approximately 24 millimeters. On the rear, we have the 2 exhaust vents here. So this is where the bulk of the hot air will be vented out of this particular laptop. The air is sucked in from the bottom, and I'll show you that shortly. So gigabit LAN, we have right here mini DisplayPort 1.4a, that's 4K 60, and right here HDMI 2.0a, also 4K 60 maximum. And this is our DC in here for powering the laptop and charging it. On the left side, we have a USB 2 port and 3.5mm headphone jack with mic support. It's very loud and it doesn't have any static over it. Now, what is missing for me is an SD card reader. It would have been great to have on this particular laptop, but it is sadly missing. So we do have high quality plastics that Xiaomi has used throughout this whole laptop, and I do like it. So the Redmi G gaming laptop here, no metal, but it resists the fingerprints and the smudges a lot better. But it is still heavy at that 2.5 kilos I showed you just previously. So there's a texture to it here. This design some people may not like too much. I don't actually mind it. It doesn't scream gamer. There's no big glowing red logo here on the back or anything, which is great to see that they've moved away from that. In fact, no. With Xiaomi laptops, they never did that kind of gamer bling on their laptops. Even their gaming series, the Mi Gaming laptops I have reviewed don't do that. So the hinge here, nice and stiff, but you can still open it up with one hand, as you can see. Backlit, full-sized keyboard, and I've been typing on this keyboard now for the 4 days when I've started to record this review now, and I really do enjoy this keyboard. I think it's one of the better gaming laptop keyboards that I've used for a while now. We have a very nice plastic that they have used on the top here, and of course the backlighting has 3 stages to it as well. So right now I'm just showing the different stages with the lights off. That it does have quite a nice illumination to it around it. It doesn't leak out underneath the keys. There's no real backlight bleed from the keyboard as well. So the number pad is here. We've got the function key to get the home end page up and down, print screen button, arrow keys, and they have just a slight outline around the WASD keys here, just to confirm that yes, it is a gamer laptop. So plastics on the palm rest, again, quite resistant to sweat, fingerprints, and smudges and marks. Up the top here, this is simply a vent. This is not where the speakers are. I'll show you the internals soon so we can actually look at where those speakers are and the battery size and everything else and upgrades. Now this touchpad here, very, very good to use. For a gaming laptop, this is probably one of the better touchpads, and it's the same for the Mi gaming laptops as well, that they do use a nice touchpad. It has a very smooth, nice plastic finish to it. Windows 10 gesture support and the finer movements, I don't have any problems with them. The accuracy is really quite good. So on the underside, we've got the 2 downwards firing speakers, front rubber feet, nice and solid, and they give it a very nice sturdy feel to it when it's sitting on top of a table, and a very large rubber foot here along the back that's separated into 3 different sections. Now this does have quite a nice height to it. It's approximately about 5 millimeters, and that allows good airflow to right here, the bottom vent. So this is all this area right here, intake vent, so it gets a lot of nice fresh air to come in and then blow that out the sides and out the back. Now, getting access to the internals is a little tricky. So obviously you've got to remove all of the screws, but there's one that's hidden under that middle foot there. So you need to pry that off, and it was actually very difficult to get it out. So use a plastic pry tool, and there is a slight chance that you could actually damage some of the edges. Now, to get the rear cover off, start around the top, the very back of it, at the lid, pry it apart, again using a pry tool. So we have 3 thermal transfer pipes. This is the main one right here. So there's a bridge between the CPU and the GPU, the 2 smaller ones either side. So the hot air is going to vent out the sides. The bulk of it's going to go out the back. That's where most of the heat goes out of it. And here we have the 2 RAM slots here. So SODIMM slots DDR4, and they've actually used 3200 megahertz RAM in here. I've got 2 sticks of DDR4 8 gigabytes, but you can add up to 64, so 2 sticks of 32 if you wanted to do so. Now there is a bit of electromagnetic shielding that is over the top of this, so you need to just pull that off, but it's easy to access. Right here is our wireless card, so you can upgrade this if you wanted to do so, but it is very, very quick, this one here. It's Wi-Fi 6 spec, it is the Intel AX 2001, and our NVMe drives, 512 gigabytes is in this particular model, but there is a second slot here as well. Now this slot supports NVMe, but it also supports SATA 3 too as well. So you can add a cheaper drive with more capacity if you wanted to do so, even though it's a little bit slower. One thing to note though, that Xiaomi didn't put any thermal pads on the back of this metal plate that goes over the top, which is kind of weird because it looks like they're using some shielding there, that this is meant to be basically a heatsink for it. So I do recommend putting some 1 millimeter thick thermal pads on this if you're going to go this far and get into the internals. 2 downwards firing loudspeakers right here, and our battery. So the battery capacity, this one is 55 watt hours. Now they could have actually gone with a larger size, I feel, because if you take a look at free space, we have approximately a finger width right here, and then 2 fingers here that they could have used, maybe possibly 1. So I think we could have had an additional cell bringing the battery up to maybe something like, say, 67 or 68 watt hours. Now, this particular battery, this one will run here for approximately about 1 hour and 20 minutes gaming, so not a lot. And then because the screen's 144 hertz, battery life is somewhere between about 4 to 5 hours, which is rather poor, but as expected for a gaming laptop, it was never going to actually be good to start with. So we have a great looking visual BIOS here from Xiaomi with this particular model. It looks really good. So for example, if I go to click on our drives, which are the 2 SSDs, it points out where it is on the little map there of the internals, the RAM speeds, and information on the RAM is there as well. And it does show the fan curves. Okay, so this is our fan profiles. Now you can't actually change it right here, but under the advanced options. So to go into the advanced options, just going to click up here. And by the way, this BIOS is in English. The advanced options now, when you go into the power menu, you've got system performance, and system performance is changing the power limits, but also the fan curves. So there's turbo mode for maximum fan noise and performance, balance mode, which is default, which I will be keeping it on that particular mode for the entirety of this review, and silent mode, which has less fan RPM and does restrict the performance a little bit, but you get a quiet laptop as a result. Looking at our screen now, so this one is 16.1 inches. It's an IPS panel with a anti-glare coating, And the maximum brightness, Xiaomi claims it's supposed to be around 300 nits. Now with my tools, I'm measuring right here, about 270 is the peak brightness, which is still fine for indoor use, but I wish it was just a little more than this. Over 300 would be ideal, but it's quite a decent panel. Now we have slim bezels, and as I mentioned before, when we looked at the design and build with this, there is rubber around the outside as well, and it's, again, very good quality, the plastics and everything. I'm getting a tiny little bit of light bleed, like leakage down in the bottom right-hand corner. This will vary from unit to unit. Now, the calibration out of the box, I did notice to be somewhat of a cool tint to it, so the white balance is a little bit off, and I've calibrated it now with my Spider Pro. So let's take a look at exactly what can we expect with this particular screen here. Now, Xiaomi's claim is 100% sRGB, and it's not far off. 95% sRGB, as you can see right here, and NTSC is 67%. Adobe RGB, 72%. P3 is also 72%. So it's not actually a bad screen at all for a gaming laptop. So here's our webcam, and yeah, it's in a terrible location on the bottom bezel here. I really wish that they could put it in the top bezel in the normal place. And we've got dual array microphones. What you're listening to now is those microphones. If you type on the keyboard, you're going to see your fingers in the way too as well. They're in a bit of noise coming through, but really if you're in a conference call or chat, Zoom call, whatever, Skype, that you shouldn't actually be typing on the keyboard because those mics are going to pick up all of that noise. And you really should be using a headset anyway, but the webcam is very grainy, as you can see, so quite poor quality. And I've even got some reasonably bright lights on. So naturally, this being an imported model from China, Windows 10 is all in Chinese. So there's two ways you can go about this. So what I normally do is I upgrade from the Windows 10 Home Chinese single language version to then add a Windows 10 Pro key. That way I can install then the English language pack. And the reason why I do this is I retain the factory recovery partition. If that's important to you, then this is probably the best way to go about it. Otherwise, the method that doesn't cost any additional money, of course, is just to simply do a fresh clean install of Windows 10 Home. Now, the CD key, well, the license that's in the BIOS, that'll pull through. As long as you install Windows 10 Home, it'll be valid, it'll be legit, you won't have any problems. You download the drivers from Xiaomi's website, mi.com. You may have to translate it from Chinese into English, but you can hunt around and you can find those drivers. Now, included software, if you're interested in this, it looks like we do have Office with this, Microsoft Office, and also this right here, which is basically Mi Gallery. It's just a fancy rotating gallery there for your wallpapers, and Gbox. Gbox here, this is basically a resource manager, so you can see our CPU use, the GPU, while RAM use right there, and just a few other things. So losing this, if you do a clean install, I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem there. It doesn't really add that much to this included software. I have the English language pack set up, and I've installed all of my different applications that I like to test out for benchmarks. Before I get onto those benchmark results here and show you the performance, a quick peek at the device manager. So I wanted to just outline a few things here. So our disk drive, the main drive here is well, there's only one drive it comes with. I've actually installed a Sabrent just to check it out and see and confirm that it does support NVMe drives. So it is a Phison, this one here, 512 gigabytes. And Xiaomi has partitioned this one into two different partitions. So one for Windows, another one that they've labeled as data, which is handy in a way because if you've got all your documents and things stored on that second partition, you do a factory reset, you won't actually lose them. Now the drive speeds, it's not as fast as say a Samsung PM981. That's a Samsung 970 EVO that we often see, the PM versions, which are the ODM versions of these drives, NVMe PCIe x4, would be in a lot of these gaming laptops, but this one slightly behind there, but overall it's still a fast drive, a lot faster than SATA 3, of course. Now the slot does support the second one, SATA 3, if you wanted to use that, cheaper drives. And if we move down and have a look at our wireless, so this is the Wi-Fi 6 AX201. As I showed you, you can change this card. If you really wanted to do so, you can swap it out for a Realtek one. If you wanted to, who knows, do a Hackintosh build or something. Now, the maximum transfers from this are super quick. So with my wireless 6 router, I'm able to get up to 1.5 gigabits per second transfers on average, sometimes down to about 1.3, but it is very quick. It's faster than the LAN port on here, which is gigabit, and that is a Realtek there for that. Now, our CPU that's on board here, so this one is a quad core with 8 threads, and it is a 10th gen. So what we've got is a base clock of 2.5 gigahertz and a maximum turbo of 4.5. And for the GTX 1650 Ti that this has for our, of course, dedicated graphics, it's actually not a bad combination. And they team up together quite well, and really, we could have gone maybe with a Core i7 in here with 6 cores, would have been a little bit better for our multi-core performance, but it's still really quite decent, I feel, this performance here. So let's have a look at Cinebench. So you're going to get a score of about 850 CB here, which is, it's really not too bad at all. And a superposition benchmark ran this one as well. So these benchmarks you can download on your own machine, your old laptop, run it to see what kind of performance increase you're going to get, or perhaps a decrease, depends on what kind of machine you've got, of course. So over 6,600 points there, which is great. And I just get into the Cinebench R20 score here as well. So this one's over 2,000. Now, in order to get over 2,000, what I did is I did actually increase the power limit. You can boost this up beyond the stock, and you don't run into any issues with thermals. Thermals will get up to about 90, slightly over 90 degrees, but it doesn't actually trigger any thermal throttling. And you do get quite a bit of a benefit in the performance. It can hold 4.2 gigahertz across all of the 4 cores, which is quite beneficial to do this. But that's the only thing we can tweak, because if you have a look here at the core, so that's the stock power limits right there, but you cannot undervolt this one here. It's locked out to us, and that is a shame. Now, there was a BIOS update that actually came through from Windows Update, oddly enough. They pushed through the firmware Xiaomi from the Windows Update system, and it didn't actually change this at all, which is just a little disappointing. I would have liked to have actually seen undervolting. Would have been great with these Intel chips, of course, just to help boost performance. So this first up is, well, Firestrike that I ran as well. So again, it's a benchmark you can download on your own system and test out the performance. Not bad for the GTX 1650 Ti. The performance is good. Physics score as well is quite good there. That's excellent. And creeping up towards 10,000 points there on the graphics score. So what I did do is a bit of an overclock. In fact, it's quite a large overclock that I've been able to run on this particular GPU on this version that I've got. I mean, my model, this is going to vary from unit to unit. Very stable overclock, 60 megahertz more on the core and 1000, so gigabyte more on the memory. I could even push this a little bit higher, but really it doesn't warrant that much of a benefit at all doing so, because the graphics score barely really increases. It's only gone up, as you can see here, about 400 points, and you're getting just marginally a little margin of extra performance. So it's not actually worth it really overclocking this particular GPU here. Times by score as well, and I did run Geekbench 4, very good score. Multi-core score, not as good as the 6 cores, of course, to be expected, and Geekbench 5 here. So that is it for the synthetic benchmarks. And of course, I will show you some gaming, but first, a little bit of 4K video editing with Adobe Premiere Pro. So this is the latest version of Adobe Premiere Pro. Now, it probably looks a little bit messed up. That's because I'm using scaling of 150% just for this video, so you can see things a little clearer. Now, the timeline, very quick. I've had no issues with this, and the playback as well, very fast. Now, I normally keep it at about half, actually, and it's not lagging behind or anything. Remember that I'm actually using the CUDA cores here. Most people would. It's by default. So it's using the NVIDIA CUDA cores here to boost the rendering performance, and that is why the timeline is so smooth and good there. So let's have a look at the export performance now. So I'm just going to go into the YouTube preset. It's my test I always do to check on exactly how long it's going to take 1 minute of footage, and then start here on the timer. So this should be very, very quick. You can see it's going to finish up in a matter of literally seconds. That's going to be under 30 seconds. Wow, this is excellent. Great performance. Okay, there we go. So that was, it's safe to say, probably about 18 seconds. Adobe Premiere Pro, the new updates, really pushing that performance, and it seems to just work so much better exporting times, I've noticed, with Intel. So the clip here, play that back quickly. So that is fine. That is working. It's encoded that all correctly. No issues. Just double check that, confirm the bit rate, and it is definitely 4K. So excellent performance. That is so fast, that export time, under 20 seconds. Wow. Onto the gaming performance now. So if you thought that the GTX 1650 Ti could actually play new titles or newer titles, with the normal graphics setting preset. Think again, because this is Far Cry 5, and I set it to the normal preset, ran the benchmark, and we got an average frames per second of, this is good though, over 60 frames per second, 67, but you're nowhere near the 144 frames per second that you want, of course, to match the screen refresh rate. So that's really only for older, less demanding titles, that you're going to be able to achieve that sort of frame rate. The next game I tested out was Shadow of Tomb Raider. So this one gets an average frames per second with the benchmark on the low preset of just 74 frames per second, which is above 60 frames per second, taking advantage a little bit of the 144 Hz screen. But even on the lowest possible settings, it's going to be nowhere near 144 frames per second with at least this more demanding title. And even a lighter title like Grand Theft Auto 5 still cannot get anywhere near on the normal preset, our magical 144 frames per second, of course, to match that refresh rate. And that's still a bus here. So that's a little disappointing. So really, I think it's a bit of a mismatch with the GPU and, of course, the screen. Not that I'm complaining, it's a 144 Hz screen, it's great. But I really feel we need a minimum of the RTX 2060 with this particular screen, so we can get something a little bit closer, even with these older titles, to 144 frames per second. Which are here on the low preset 1080p, we are looking at about approximately 80 frames per second. The performance is decent, but of course we're not getting anywhere near, again, that screen refresh rate to be expected, but it is of course faster and slightly better than, say, the older laptops stuck at 60 Hz with the older screen panels, without that higher refresh rate. So even Counter-Strike on some high settings here is scraping over 144 frames per second. And this is an online game, a full server, and it occasionally dips below 144, but most of the time, I'd say a good 90% of the time, it is going to be over 144 frames per second. So these competitive games and older titles with light engines shouldn't be an issue then to run them at 144 frames per second. So the fan noise on this particular laptop, when it's not doing anything demanding, it's not actually bad at all. You'd hear it cycle on and off. If you're watching just, say, a movie, then the fans turn off. They turn off when it gets under, I would say, about 50 degrees. You can see that in the BIOS as well with the fan profile. So on the balanced mode, it does, at 100% RPMs, get up to approximately 42 decibels, 41. It's not as loud as other gaming laptops I have reviewed, especially the ones with the fan boost modes. It's actually quite a bit quieter. Those ones can get very, very loud. But here is a sample now of the kind of fan noise you can expect under full load when gaming. And onto our thermals now. So when you're gaming for 1 hour, in fact, I was gaming for almost 2 hours here, it did actually get warm to the touch just next to the arrow keys, reaching a warm 47 degrees Celsius. Now, internal temperatures, we've got 95 degrees on the CPU max and 78 on the GPU. So Linux support, I did quickly test that out, and there's no point me showing a clip of that because it all works. Everything works fine with Linux. Just go for a recent distro, you'll have then support for the drivers for the wireless card, which is really, really quick. I'm getting transfer speeds of up to a peak of about 1.5 gigabits per second faster than the gigabit LAN port in this machine. So excellent build quality. I cannot get this message across because you're probably thinking plastic and how can that be a good build, but no, it is very, very good. There's absolutely no flaws, super high quality, no sharp edges, and it does resist the fingerprints a little bit better than the metal palm rests we have. Now, really nice touchpad on this. I really do like it. Gaming laptops, you normally have terrible touchpads, but in the Mi gaming laptop series and then in this one, they always use very good large touchpads that you normally find in, say, Ultrabooks. I know gamers will be gaming with a mouse, but even though you're not using a mouse, you want to just use it as a normal laptop, you have an excellent touchpad and a great backlit keyboard. So yes, it doesn't have RGB, the keyboard, which may disappoint some people, but I'm happy with the white. It is very evenly distributed and really good there. Now the screen, let's talk a little bit about this. Excellent screen in here. The brightness, not quite as good as I had hoped. Xiaomi claimed 300 nits. I managed to get just 270. In fact, 269 nits was the maximum I managed to get out of my panel. A tiny bit of a light leakage down in this corner, but I only see it on black static images, really. That's it. So it's not really an issue. The hinge, very good, and it does go back about that far there, which is good. Now, this laptop can also run 4 screens in total. So you've got the Type-C, the DisplayPort HDMI for your 3 external monitors, and then if we count the built-in screen, that is 4 there. So overall, very quick, very snappy, very fast, great performance, good gaming performance as well for 1080p. All the games are going to be playable. However, we get into a bit of an issue, I feel, in terms of the value proposition of this one, that maybe you're probably better off actually getting an RTX 2060 laptop. So this, at the time of this video, retails for 860 euros. But here locally, for about 1100 euros, you can get yourself the Ryzen 7 4800H, an 8-core CPU with 16 threads, much more potent than this. It is an absolute beast of a chipset, and I've got a laptop with that in there. And then of course the RTX 2060 is better, I think, of a match paired up to a 144 Hz screen. Not to say that this can't actually drive games like, for example, Counter-Strike I showed you there, 144 frames per second. Above that on average is what we want, and we can achieve that, which is good. That's even on the high settings. So your competitive games will have very good frame rates, great response time as well, and just a lot better than a 60 Hz screen. And you can get a lot of the more demanding titles with, say, low settings or normal settings to achieve well over 60 frames per second. So we're still taking advantage of that refresh rate. So the screen does not have G-Sync, okay? This is because we have the switchable graphics, which I believe is the best option here, because the switchable graphics allows us to get a battery life running on the Intel 10th gen integrated graphics to be around about 4 to 5 hours of mixed use, depending on what you're doing. You could actually squeeze out a little bit more, because I was using around 30 to 40% brightness. So if you lower the brightness right down, you should be able to get a little bit more in terms of battery life. Now, if you game on the battery, you don't get the same performance, naturally, and the battery life is only just over 80 minutes. That's it, so not a lot of time really to game. Now the screen, I wanted to point out as well, it does have DC dimming. So this is very good. I'm not seeing any flicker at lower brightness settings. So if you're someone that is very susceptible to that flicker, pulse width modulation flicker, I don't see it. It's not coming through at all on the screen. And even when I record as well the screen at lower brightnesses, you can see that it's not showing that pulse width modulation flicker. So that brings me on to probably the biggest con with this one is, like all gaming laptops, you're going to get a bit of fan noise. It's in fact not the worst I've heard. My XMG laptop that I have, the Core 15, that fan noise is very loud, especially on the Gamer Boost mode. And this one, it gets a little loud, as I pointed out. It's up to about 46 or so decibels when you're gaming, and it's okay for a gaming laptop. Now thermals. Keyboard normally remains cold. However, where the arrow keys are, as I pointed out, there's a bit of a hot patch right there. I think that's where the chipset is, and that's where a bit of heat is coming through. And it seems to get up to about 48 degrees Celsius. So that area, just that area, a little bit too hot for my liking personally. It's warm to the touch there. And then we did peak at 95 degrees C. So that's just one thing to factor in. Now that was only for a few seconds, but gaming after 1 hour, you're going to feel that heat, and it does the cooling do a good job, but I just feel it could be a little bit better. Perhaps I need to repaste it. I don't know, maybe that could lower my temperatures by 5 degrees or so, maximum temps there. And it is really a good laptop if you can get it for a great price and you don't mind and you're happy with the GTX 1650 Performance Ti, that is. Then I would say go for it. But of course, check your local market, see what other options there are before you pull the trigger on an import device like this, because we do have Windows 10 in Chinese that you need to fix when you first get it. Not hard to do, either a clean install with the key on there, install Windows 10 Home, you won't have any licensing issues, get the drivers off the Xiaomi website, and away you go, or as I showed you, just upgrade it. So thank you so much for watching this in-depth review, and I shall see you hopefully back in the next one. If you like the video, please give a thumb up, and why not subscribe for more up-and-coming, detailed, in-depth reviews from me.